My name is Vicki Holman, and I'm the manager of the BC Forest Discovery Centre. I've been here for about 5 years. The Discovery Centre is actually operated and owned by the British Columbia Forest Museum Society, a non-profit. Often people think that we are government because we have the BC in front of our name, as in the BC Forest Discovery Centre. The BC reflects that our collection is indicative of what kind of things that you would find in British Columbia. We are completely a non-profit organization. We struggle for every nickel that we find. There are admission fees that definitely help to support what it is that we do here. To count on volunteers. Last year we had 6,500 hours of volunteer time dedicated to this site. We have retired people who are interested in mechanicking, and they're interested in woodwork, landscape. Lots of them pack their lunch and come to work every day, and they have a fondness for this place, and they're from this community, and they understand that as a nonprofit and as a museum, that it takes a lot, and they've been chipping in, and it's really heartwarming to see how people can contribute to making such a beautiful green space and preserving history here. It's really nice. The collection, the locomotives and a large portion of the collection, originated as a private collection of Gerry Wellburn. He just liked to collect the artifacts, the trains, logging equipment. He had a real soft spot for big steel, and hated to see it just, shut down and quit running, and he would find a way to get it home. He got to one point where he had operational locomotives, and so he built a track at his own property. It was up in Glenora. But in 1964 is when the thought process around opening the collection to the public really started to begin. They started to look here on Vancouver Island. Down in Sydney, I think, was one option, and some of the politicians here in the Cowichan region, from the city of Duncan, the municipality of North Cowichan and Lake Cowichan, thought that this would be a much better area, and they were fortunate to find this piece of property, originally 6 hectares, and they moved the collection here and built the narrow gauge railway and started the Forest Museum here on this site. The collection is a reflection of the artifacts, the equipment, the logging processes back in, say, the early 1900s, right through to the 1950s and 60s. That is kind of one part of the collection. From there, the collection continued to grow with other contributions from other forest companies or other individuals, or the provincial government. We currently house the Ministry of Forests collection, and it's full of artifacts of, vintage fire pumps and posters and petrified wood. From there, over the last few years, what's been going on at the Discovery Centre here, and what the board have been trying to do, is to broaden that mandate that not only says this is a museum of forest history and forest industry, but this is a museum of how forest communities grew. Our collection is focused on the coast. I think we have a fantastic forest on the coast here. And, we have big, large Douglas fir forests. We have, huge Sitka spruces that, some are preserved and people can actually see them. You can walk through Carmanah. You can, even go through onto Port Alberni, and you can drive through those big, huge trees. We are very fortunate to have such an amazing landscape here on the island. And we're we don't have that first growth forest, but what we do have is a mature Douglas fir forest. It is a second growth forest. It's beautiful. We have large old growth vets in our forest, but it's certainly not a forest made up of those trees. But it does clearly reflect the ecosystem of the forest communities of coastal British Columbia. We're also very fortunate to be placed right on Sominoes Lake, and our property does include what used to be farm, but is now clearly wetland, and it has a diverse population of waterfowl, it has beautiful trails, it has an interpretive kiosk. The waterfowl that come throughout the season are amazing. You can see the big wood ducks or the buffleheads. I even found some wood ducks in the trees, so I thought that was pretty cool last winter. So it's really a neat space. So over the years, we went from 6 hectares to 40 hectares. The farm, I think back in the 70s or 80s, I can't really remember the right day, but back in the 70s or 80s, there was a farm. The farm closed down, and the family and the local area governments were able to acquire that farm and add it to the 6 hectares. So today we're actually what I call a 100-acre museum, open-air museum.
Living museum.
The living museum, absolutely. We have, I think, a very broad audience that come to the museum here. We do have lots of, older people who used to work in the forest who can actually relate to the equipment on site and the exhibits and the displays. The other thing that people come here for is a family venue. We have a train and a train ride, and at different seasons throughout the year we operate different kinds of trains. Children love trains, they love train rides. The thing that we run is a 1940 vintage gas-powered locomotive, and we call it the Green Hornet, and it's painted bright colors, and the kids love that one. So quite often when we're really busy, we'll be running the Speeder and the Green Hornet at the same time, and so you come for more than one train ride. During our peak seasons, traditionally in July, August, for special events such as the Halloween train or even the Christmas train, we run the steam locomotive. And last year, our steam locomotive was 100 years old. So that's a whole other experience, and it is actually a whole other target audience that really appreciates and is enthusiastic about the steam locomotive. So we see lots and lots of people from southern US. We had phone calls from New Zealand where the woman has said, we're coming out in August and we want to make sure that the steam train's coming, right? So they may not be planning their trip just to come to the Forest Discovery Center, but they're planning their trip so that when they come to Vancouver Island, that they can come here and the steam train will be running. So it is part of that whole vacation planning process. We're right on the highway, but as soon as you come into our parking lot, enter the doors, you're in this fantastic urban green space where you can actually lose a sense of time, a sense of rush. We have a playground and marsh and meadows and picnic tables, and you can actually come here and unwind as well. The wildlife here is fantastic. We have, resident deer, and so at certain times of the year you can see their spotted fawns out on the trails. It's fabulous. Mostly they come out after hours. They are very cautious. We had a pair of owls. We did a bird watching tour one year, and the owls just found a perch right on the branch, right in the middle of the forest, and they sat there all day while we just trucked people on by for bird watching tours all day long. They're very obedient. We do events for several reasons. One is fundraising. Whenever we do a special event and we do value-added pieces to it and add attractions, celebrate community holidays, etc. Some of the reasons that we do events are for fundraising purposes. The other reason that the museum conducts or carries out special events is because it does help to fulfill what it is that we're supposed to be teaching the community about. One of our most successful events is the maple syrup, the West Coast Big Leaf Maple Syrup Festival. Not many people are familiar, but our big leaf maples do create a lot of sap, and they do produce, we have a group of people called the sap suckers, and they produce a lot of maple syrup. So once a year, usually the beginning of February, we have the Big Leaf Maple Syrup Festival, and people are invited. There's maple tasting, maple tapping demonstrations, workshops. Not everybody understands that when they come to visit the Forest Museum that they're actually getting a lesson on forest history. We try and kind of like sneak that educational piece in. So right now we have a group of kids out and they're doing a workshop with a couple of leaders, and it's called Forest Survivor. And so they think that it's fun and games and they're going off and they're learning orienteering, but actually they're learning orienteering and about some of the artifacts, about some of the trees, you know, that is associated with what we do here, right? So it's kind of special events and special programs is a sneaky way of, you know, putting education into a quality family experience.
Right, and really.
If you come to the West Coast and you happen into a West Coast temperate rainforest, the experience is very, very different. It's moist, it's humid, you have vegetation all on the forest floor that is a very diverse ecosystem that has, you know, creatures growing very different and that you can't necessarily see, but you can see the bushes rustle and whatnot. And then you have these large trees that just seem to go on forever. And maybe what we'll find on the lower grounds is when we look up, we'll be able to see this absolutely massive eagle's nest where, you know, we've had a pair of eagles mating. They got a couple of babies and they're learning to fly. And it's just the life in the forest is really, really exciting, right? And so when we talk about forestry and the artifacts in the collection that we have here, the collection reflects the scale of the trees, the scale of the landscape, the scale of the terrain. We have artifacts that indicate the evolution of how we harvested those types of trees. This locomotive that you see behind me is a Climax locomotive. It's certainly not built for carrying passengers. It's actually built for steep terrain on the West Coast. It's built for hauling big logs. The way that it is engineered and the way its pistons are is specific to the design of how to move big logs. There are a couple of different types, the Climax and the Shea locomotive. We have beautiful examples of those locomotives here on site, and you can see the difference in the way that their pistons operate. The engineers, the technology and the evolution of the technology is amazing, and for us to be able to preserve it here and provide a history to people who want to learn more about it is really a beautiful opportunity. The exhibits here are interesting, and they're not exhibits that you would see in a traditional museum. We have nearly 50 buildings or structures here on site, so from a building perspective there's a lot of building maintenance, but 12 of those buildings are historically significant. So we have a 1905 schoolhouse, and that building we use for programming, education programs. We put through about 1,500 kids a year in educational programs that meet Ministry of Education curriculum, primary and intermediate. We have genuine 1940s logging camp buildings, and in those logging camp buildings are displays that depict life of the logger in a camp situation. So there's the saw shed, the timekeeper shop, the cookhouse, the games room, the bunkhouses where they actually, you know, slept, but there's also a first aid station or a first aid room. Those exhibits have the artifacts from the era, and they're in the buildings of the era. So you do get a sense of stepping back in time. The other really, really interesting building that I like is the Kaikus blacksmith shop. So the bunkhouses were from Copper Canyon, which is just north. Kaikus building from Lake Cowichan area, and in it is all the tools of the trade. You'd see, you know, their forging equipment, the big giant forge, and it's set up just like it was set up at Kaiki's camp. The other exhibit or display that we have is currently being revitalized is the Ministry of Forest Ranger Station, Ranger Garage, and that is genuine buildings. They were housed just south of Duncan, right, I think just off of Allenby Road. So they were moved here in 1984, and they have in them set up what it would have looked like when the ranger had lived there. And in the garage, it's a 4-bay garage. We have an old trailer from the 40s for when the surveyors would go up into the forest for a number of months and camp out and live in the forest and do surveying and make maps and things like that. We have the lookout tower, the Ranger Station lookout tower. That's actually a replica, and it was constructed for Expo 86, I believe. And then once they finished with Expo, they brought it over here and put it here. And it is designed not necessarily exactly like the lookout tower would have looked like, but it's designed so that a group of people and a long lineup of people could go up one side through the exhibit and then down the other side. So it's kind of interesting. It's not a genuine, but it is a replica, and it is an interesting building. We do continue to get acquisitions. A couple of years ago, we received a Diamond T. It's in beautiful condition. It was restored by Bill Simpson. Bill could no longer drive the vehicle for health reasons, and one of the things that he wanted to do was not just, you know, send it off or sell it. He wanted to be able to have it be on display, continuing and making sure that people could see it and appreciate not only his work, but the evolution of logging vehicles or forestry vehicles. Most recently, we did acquire 1951, I hope I have the date right, Chev. Yeah, it was a Chev truck, and it was the first delivery truck for Pacific Builders and Hardware Company. So that's on display. It's in our main hall, and yeah, we continue to get lots of interesting things. We do get often people come in off the street and say, "Oh, I was just at a garage sale and I found this. Do you guys want it?" But you know, they don't always understand that there is a process around receiving artifacts. We need to make sure that we have the rights to the artifact, that it is, ownership is transferred to the museum. So quite often we'll find people that want to lend us things. We are so hard pressed for space and funds to look after what we got. We can't actually afford to look after other people's stuff. So when people look to donate to the Forest Discovery Center or the Forest Museum, we do require that the artifact then belongs to the Museum Society, and we vet it for relevance to the industry, relevance to the community, and whether or not we have a duplicate, because we do have an extensive collection. Probably what you see on site is less than half of what we have in storage. We just don't have the space, and quite often it's easier to store things in our situation, in our financial situation right now, than it is to display them. We have, each year we get over 300 members. People purchase memberships for a number of reasons. Most often it's a family membership where a family of 5 can visit the museum 10 times for an excellent value. This year I think is $80. There are individual memberships where people can come unlimited times. And then there are memberships that companies can purchase to support the museum. Quite often those are forest companies. More and more often we get our corporate memberships actually from the retail sector or the tourism sector now. Accommodations and hotels will purchase a corporate membership where they can actually have some of their guests use it. And so it's kind of a benefit for them. But we have lots of people who simply purchase a membership in order to support the preservation of the history of what we represent. And those are